Thank you for coming tonight. I'd like to welcome you to Asia Society Hong Kong Center. We are thrilled to have with us today Inbal Arieli, who is the author of Chutzpah, as you can see up here, and to talk about Israel's dynamic tech ecosystem and innovation environment. And with her, we have Andrew Young of Sino Group, who will conduct the interview and moderate the session. First, I'd like to welcome Consul General of Israel, Amir Lati, to make some introductory remarks.
Good evening. Thank you, Hailey. Pleasure to be here in the Asia Society. It's part of our continuous collaboration with Asia Society in many fields. And we do see it as one of the best platforms, I think. It's more suitable platforms in Hong Kong, really, to showcase art, to showcase culture, to showcase innovation and technology. And I'm not just saying that because it's the first time that I'm saying it as a fully fledged member. We really mean it. Today we have with us Inbal Arieli, and the talk will be moderated by Andrew Young. So Inbal, as she mentioned in her book, was born on hummus and Chutzpah, right? Chutzpah is, hummus is one of the most popular street foods in the Middle East, made of chickpeas. The Chutzpah, I leave up to you to describe what it is. It's her first visit to Hong Kong. She didn't see much because we made sure that she will be busy beyond, I think, her expectations and probably ours too, but in a way it shows the interest and the hunger to hear about innovation, to hear about Israel innovation and so on. So we met, I should say that we met yesterday for the first time, but when we met yesterday for the first time, we found out that there is a very good chance that we also met 47 years ago, but because we were born in the same place and in almost the same street, but from 47 years ago, neither of us have very strong recollections, so we will manage for now for the first time. And I think her talk comes from two very interesting angles. One of them is from the author angles, somebody that met, researched, and so on, but the other one is that she's also an entrepreneur herself, which is a very good combination. Andrew, I can stand here and introduce you for a very long time. I will not do that. I will say that I met him when I came to Hong Kong 2 years ago, and he's really one of the more knowledgeable persons that I met here about technology, about innovation, how to assimilate technology, how to assimilate new innovation, being part of, in a very crucial and important role in the Sino Group that also doesn't need any introductions. And the reason why he was really the first name that came to my mind to moderate this is because he is well acquainted with the ecosystem here, but he's also well acquainted with the ecosystem in Israel, as somebody that has been traveled here numerous times and brought technologies from Israel here. Is the one that can ask the right questions, and he is a person that really knows how to bridge, and it needs some bridge between the Israeli culture and the Asian culture. Another one that could do it is Ronnie Chan, but he's too busy being the chairman of this esteemed establishment. We hope to see him later on. Thank you very much again. I leave the floor to you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Inbal.
And we've decided to give you the best of two. We will do a short presentation, and then we'll also have a conversation, which I'm truly looking forward to answer and have a conversation, of course, with Andrew, but also answer your questions. So I want to start with probably something that you already know. Okay, and that is, if you're here and if you're interested in Israel, if you're interested in, can you hear me well with the mic? It's okay. If you're interested in Israel, if you're interested in technology, you probably have heard many, many times about the success of Israel as the startup nation, maybe even read the book, Startup Nation, and already know that Israel is extremely strong, both as a startup entrepreneurial hub, but at the same time also as an innovative country. You know, these two elements don't always come together. In Israel, we see both. So there is a lot of vibrant activity of bubbling startups, but at the same time also deep innovation that is really rooted in our ecosystem. Innovation in Israel is also in a variety of industries, which is another unique element and important for our conversation later on. It's not just one industry where there is expertise. For example, like in Switzerland, where the pharmaceutical industry is driving innovation of Switzerland. But actually in Israel of 2023, 2022, of the past decade or two, innovation is across the board in a variety of industries, ranging from more, I would say, obvious industries such as cyber, into completely non-relevant to Israel industries, such as computer vision and navigation systems and healthcare, which are not relevant in the sense that they do not necessarily address domestic problems, right, of the Israeli market, an extremely small market, but actually address global challenges from overseas. So these three elements already, the fact that there is the highest density of startups, the fact that Israel is extremely innovative in technology in a variety of industries, that by itself is already a good start. But it's not just that. In addition to that, we see that Israel of 2022, that's the latest formal numbers that we have, attracts the highest concentration per capita of venture capital funding into a hub of innovation, as you can see in the chart here. And also at the bottom, for those interested in numbers, it is the percentage of investment from the GDP in R&D. Okay? So, and of course, all of the numbers that I'm showing here are non-military related, because the idea is, of course, to compare between different countries, and we're putting aside defense and military industries. So the percentage that Israel as a country invests in R&D as a percentage from the GDP is the highest in the world today, very close to South Korea, and actually every year there's kind of a switch in places. So for a second, let's assume it's actually relatively similar. It's similar in the number, in the percentage. It's just lower than 6%, but very different in its nature when we look deep into how these two economies actually invest in R&D. It's different mostly in the sense that in South Korea, most of that investment comes from the government. It's originated by the government, by incentives, by grants, by policies of the government, whereas in Israel of 2022, over 80% of that funding comes from private players, okay? And that is the investment in R&D. That's not investment, capital investment of VCs. It's an addition. Now, all of that is, again, by itself already very impressive. We also have, to complete the picture, the presence in Israel of over 400 multinationals, the largest giants of the world, with R&D offices locally in Israel. Okay, so these 430 logos, that only some of them are here, represent a very important bridge, or numerous bridges, that the Israeli innovation ecosystem has with markets overseas, with the technological leaders overseas, which is extremely important for the Israeli ecosystem because of its small size. Now, that has been our story for many years, and our narrative for many years. In the past decade, we've added another chapter to it. And the new chapter is actually the one of a scale-up ecosystem. Because until about a decade ago, including when Startup Nation, this great book, came out, the whole story was about a country of entrepreneurs, of innovators, that are capable of starting something, but bringing it only to some growth, to some size. Today, that's not the story anymore. Intel has a fab in Israel, a fab with Intel standards that are extremely, extremely strict. Possible to have such a thing in Israel. We have the largest representation on NASDAQ after the US and China in absolute numbers. Okay, over 100 Israeli companies listed on NASDAQ. And to spice it up a little more, Israel today is the country with the highest density of unicorns, so privately held, valued over $1 billion companies, mostly software companies, of course. As you can see, from 2013, from one unicorn to 2021, above 60, the situation has changed since 2021, but the trend is clear. And the story has changed, has evolved. From startup, it's possible also to scale up, and that means that the skill sets, actually, or the capabilities are no longer focused only on entrepreneurial skills. That, in a population of just over 9 million people, extremely diversified, with a workforce of less than half of the population. And the reason that we have such a relatively low percentage of workforce in Israel is the young population that we have. We have the highest birth rate in the OECD countries, and out of that, only 10% of the workforce, about 10%, are employed in that tech ecosystem, which has been the growth engine of Israel for several decades. And of course, we're often asked why and what's special in Israel, and how come Startup Nation, the book, talked about the miracle of Israel. So I'm not sure I would use the word miracle. It's a matter of belief. What happens in Israel, what happened in the past, and what still is happening today that enables this successful entrepreneurial and innovative technological ecosystem. For many years, the story was that. The story was the story of the military as one of the main explanations for that miracle, for the unique characteristics that Israel has. And for many years, within even the Israeli military, we talked about elite technological units. I chose this article, and as you can see, I also served in one of these units in my military mandatory service. Okay, as a very young 18-year-old woman who joined the military, just most Israeli women do. And but the title of this article, as many other articles that are trying to really explain the phenomenon of the Israeli military, right? We talked a little bit about that before. What's so special about it? And they call it a secret startup machine, as if there was a facility, right? A manufacturing house within the military that manufactures all these startups and innovation. It's counterintuitive to what we think when we think about military organizations. For many years, that was the explanation. But I don't think this is the actual explanation. As an Israeli who grew up on hummus and chutzpah, I actually think that it is something slightly different. I spent my entire career after my military service in the tech ecosystem in Israel, originally for the first decade as a general counsel, so I'm a lawyer by profession, but immediately emerged into the tech ecosystem, and I served originally as a general counsel to a list of Israeli tech startups, some private startups, some publicly held startups, different industries. And in 2010, after over a decade of legal practice, decided to pivot and to move into really doing business, became an entrepreneur myself. And since then, both as a founder, as an entrepreneur myself, as an executive, as an investor, as a board member to a variety of vehicles that are supporting innovation, supporting entrepreneurship from different aspects, I've realized that the true secret lies in somewhere completely differently than the military. And that goes back to where Amir and I probably met some 47 plus years ago. My story starts in Beersheba. So I'm born to Israeli parents. My mother immigrated from Poland after World War II, after the Holocaust. My father immigrated from Egypt. Okay? They met in the south of Israel in a city called Beersheba, which back in the 70s, I mean, still today, some might argue, but definitely back in the 70s didn't have too much to offer. Typical Israeli childhood, okay? At the age of 4, we moved to Geneva for my father's work for 3 years. My first childhood memories actually start in Geneva. I think most childhood memories we have start around the age of 3, 4. And maybe the contrast between Beersheba in the desert of Israel and, you know, beautiful Geneva, the Lake of Geneva, the Botanic Gardens, the International School of Geneva. That's why they created these strong first memories I have. Now, why am I telling you that? Because I think that that childhood that I had back and forth from Israel and abroad eventually contributed a lot to a different perspective that I have, a different way of looking at Israel and understanding what's special about Israel. And I want to share with you some few examples, but in order to do that, I need the friend of you know, this great philosopher, the great French Marcel Proust, that in his book of in the Search of Lost Time, 100 years ago, he did not speak about innovation. He did not use the word innovation, but he actually spoke about discoveries. But I think he meant quite the same. And he said that the real voyage of discovery for him consists not necessarily of finding new lands, but sometimes about looking at existing realities that we already know, but with a different set of eyes. And his full quote is even with 100 set of eyes. So we can look at the same thing that we already know, that we've known forever, but every time we look at it from a different direction, every time the light is a little different, the circumstances are different, we should see something different. For me, this is innovation. Okay? It's not necessarily of finding completely new things, but it's about looking at what we already know from a different perspective. And this is why also Chutzpah, the book that I wrote, offers a slightly different perspective on what so many people have already learned about Israel. And my story, in a sense, starts here. So what is this? A slide, right? I mean, all of us know exactly what this is. All of us have used this slide. Our children, our grandchildren maybe, we know exactly what you do when we see this. And taking you back to Geneva, to my first childhood memories, I did not speak English, I did not speak French, I spoke only Hebrew. So the first days of international school, my kindergarten teacher helped me, onboarded me, and showed me around. And some very vivid memory I have is from playing in the playground, where she took me by the hand to the slide, not this one, but another slide, and there was a kid in front of me. And we walked, and that kid was climbing up the ladder. And as we approached, she did like this. So I paused for a second. I understood she meant stop. The kid climbed up the ladder. She smiled at me. I understood. It was my turn. Went up the ladder. She did like this again. The kid sat. I waited, went down the slide, smiled at me. I did the same. Fun, childish, playtime. Nothing special, right? So why am I telling you this? As I started thinking about why Israel, what is really the secret of Israel, I realized that it's actually not necessarily the talent in Israel, the people themselves, not necessarily. It may be something else, just like Marcel Proust said, it may be something around them, okay? And I started looking at signs outside of playgrounds in the world. Instead of looking at the children playing in a slide, which in most places is very similar, looking at the signs that actually provide a contract or an explanation into the environment and the expectations from the individuals. This is from Croatia, and as you can see, there are some very reasonable things here on the sign that any child can look at and understand. No glass bottles, no pets. Don't ride your bicycle because kids are playing and it's dangerous. And there's also this cute child in the middle. What is he not supposed to do? According to the image, if you're looking at it, slide on the belly or maybe climb upwards. We don't know because it doesn't say exactly. But it's clear that what they mean is there's a best practice, just like my teacher taught me, just like we see kids playing in playgrounds. The structure is similar. Go up the ladder, down the slide. Here's another example from a sign that I got from Poland recently. I have a collection of slides, actually, of signs of playgrounds outside the world. Poland, more restrictions. And I don't think anyone is expecting, actually, a child to look at this and memorize and really follow the rules, but the message is clear, right? There are a lot of things you're not supposed to do. Because it creates order, it creates predictability, it respects each other, it enables everyone to have fun in the playground. Here's another one from Tenerife that I got recently, which is a little more creative and shows the same girl. By the way, one of the only slides I have, different topic with girls playing and not illustrations of boys. Okay, but that's for a different conversation we can have. Very interesting as well, of course. But the girl, for 4 times we see in the same slide, don't go up the slide, and so don't climb up. And it's the same image in all 4 slides, just a different slide. And 4 times we're telling her, you know what you have to do? You have to sit and go down the slide. Okay? Makes sense. Now welcome to Israel. This is a sign outside of a playground in Tel Aviv, today. Not 50 years ago, okay, from today. And what you see in this sign are few very different things. There's one restriction: don't light a barbecue or a bonfire. Okay, that's the only restriction. Then there is an ask, a request. Please take care of nature and of the playground, the facilities. And the third one is actually intended for the parents. It's not a sign for children because it says using the facilities up to the age of 4 requires adult supervision. Okay, now kids up to the age of 4 in Israel don't read, so it's not intended for them. It's definitely intended for their parents, and that's the only ask that we see outside of this playground. And this is what we actually see there. So if you remember the Polish example or the Croatian one, everything which was prohibited is actually happening simultaneously at the same time, as if they read the sign and they said, we'll do everything. The opposite. Now these kids playing in this playground, again, all the pictures that you'll see here are from today. Okay, it's not from the history of Israel when it was chaotic. It's from today. For me, this picture, this image, is actually the root, the core of what eventually becomes the success, the secret for the success of the Israeli tech ecosystem. Okay? Because it starts here. It starts with these children exploring and giving stage to their curiosity, giving freedom to their physical movements. Okay? Even conflict between two, as you can see this child there and the one upper that they're meeting, there's a conflict there that is happening. How will it be resolved? Do we need to tell them only ladder slide? No, they can enjoy the same structure in a variety of ways. And surprisingly, although it looks, and it is, much more chaotic, messy, loud, okay, than the example that I had in Switzerland, which, again, I have to say, I had a great time in that experience in that playground. It gives them the opportunity to train a lot of muscles or skills that every child has, not only Israeli children. The state of balagan, which in Hebrew stands for mess, for chaos, is present everywhere in Israel. Now, there are ground rules. You don't hurt another person. You're not acting in violence at all. These are ground rules that are not, we don't need to write them down. They're just basic values, of course, that are there. But other than that, play as you want. And statistically, there are no more injuries in Israeli playgrounds than in other developed countries at all. Okay, so although it seems to us, and it does seem more risky, it's not really more risky because these kids are reasonable human beings. Now, for those of you, and I know some of you have visited Israel, you probably sense this sense of balagan, of chaos in everything. It's in traffic, although Israel, the invention of Waze, this great navigation system that completely changed the way the world consumes maps, creates and consumes maps, although it comes from Israel, driving in Israel is somehow chaotic. Maybe actually for those who really use Waze and understand how it's working, it's a good explanation because Waze is an adaptive map, right? So from this chaotic situation, this unorganized chaos that exists everywhere in our life, has become actually one of the strengths, one of the main characteristics of the Israeli entrepreneurs. And that may seem very different, right? We will talk about culture, and of course, it looks different than what we see in many other places in the world. But there are also some similarities. I will argue, actually, and we'll have that argument, I hope, soon, that actually the skills that the Israeli children have or manifest in this image are also present here. I don't think we're so different, okay, or that Israeli children are so different. But there are some more obvious resemblances that we can see. For example, in Hebrew, the word I and the word we, ani, anu, come from the same root, okay, linguistically, grammatically, but it means something much deeper. It means that there is a possibility of combining I's, individuals, together with something more communal, more family-oriented, team-oriented, group-oriented, society-oriented. This tension in Israel somehow, miraculously, exists. We don't have to choose being an opinionated individual or being part of a team. We can actually be both. And when you think of diversity as a goal today in so many companies that are trying to achieve diversity of different types, it's exactly about that. It's exactly about bringing people from different backgrounds, ages, genders, that have different views into one place where they can think together but from different perspectives and not have the same voice. I could give you, and I'm happy to give you, many more examples and literally images of what it means to grow in Israel. But when we joined the military at the age of 18, we are actually joining already equipped with a toolbox, or in my view, with muscles that we've strengthened, that we've practiced, that we've nurtured throughout our childhood. In one sentence, this is the reason why Israeli military is different from other militaries in the world, because when we enter that military, we are the same children that you saw on the slide that are doing the opposite of what's sometimes recommended, that are challenging reality. Those are the same young adults that are joining the military. Now, they cannot erase in a second what they've trained and fostered throughout their childhood. It's with them. And hence the Israeli military and other frameworks that exist at the age of 18, because today in Israel, actually only 50% of the cohort of young adults at the age of 18 join the military. The other half is serving either in national service or does a gap year or somehow in a different way involved in our nation's community life, not necessarily the military. But all of these organizations and frameworks do share some characteristics that are unique to Israel. And you have them here, and I think we'll talk about some of them. So if needed, we'll go back to that slide when we'll talk about the conversation, when we'll dive into some of the elements. When you think about the Israeli military, you have to put aside the image that you have about military organizations. Okay? It's a completely different animal. It operates in a different way, and later on we'll explain why. Now, zooming out of Israel for a second, okay? The world is going through an era of change in so many aspects, right? And when we look at, or when the World Economic Forum looks at economies today in the world, in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe, anywhere in the world, we see a shift. We see a clear shift between hard skills, which were the skills that most of us here were screened by and looked at in our CVs, into much softer skills that are much more difficult to learn or to teach and need more practice. But the good news is that in my personal view, most of these soft skills actually are embedded in us as human beings, as children, anywhere in the world. Because curiosity and taking on initiative and being with social influence, for example, these are things that children, toddlers, all over the world possess just by being human beings. So I wrote this book called Chutzpah. I'll show you an image of it in a second, which is a business book, but it's actually telling the story of Israeli childhood through the lens of, or the perspective of Israeli entrepreneurs, Israeli investors, telling their own stories, but focusing on the soft skills, on these elements that are very present in Israeli day-to-day life, that are quite obvious to us Israelis, that I believe are actually critical building blocks and foundations for any economy today, for any young individual, entrepreneur or not, okay? We'll talk, of course, more about them, but the common thing about these things is when you think deeper into really, really early age children, which we all were, of course, right? That's the common thing between us all. We all were once very, very young. There are a few other things that will happen at the end of our lives that are common to everyone, but we all learned to walk the same way. Regardless if we were born in Hong Kong or in Tel Aviv, we learned to walk by trying 1,000 times, not succeeding at the beginning, right? And falling and standing up again. We learned language the same way, different languages, but the way our brains learn them is similar, by asking a lot of questions or by organizing the world, right, in our minds, in tabs. We are, as toddlers, and I saw the beautiful picture you showed me, so I'm just thinking about those beautiful children. Kids, if you put them in a room and you leave the room, they will start playing with each other, right? They are social by definition, because this is how we are as human beings. We don't need to tell them to be collaborative. That's just their nature. And they're also very proactive and physical and dynamic in movement. Again, if you don't tell them to sit and wait, if you just let them be in a room, they will start moving and they will be in motion, because this is our nature. So all of these muscles, all of these skills definitely exist in anyone around the world. It's just a matter of awareness. It's just a matter of practice. I'm often asked, okay, so what is the recipe, right? So how do we do it? Tell us not just the insights in general, but the formula. And I don't have them, because there is no formula. What's right for a startup in Israel in healthcare is different than what is right for a startup in fintech here in Hong Kong. What's right for a big bank in the US is different from what's right for a bank in India, okay? And obviously what's right for one family is different from another, and from one individual to another. So there is no formula. What I believe is that these 6 elements that together comprise of the Chutzpah mindset. Chutzpah in Hebrew can be translated into audacity. Okay? But it's more than just audacity. It's a mindset that comprises of all of these elements together, that is very proactive and encourages doing and positive doing, stepping out of our comfort zone. All of these elements, I believe, exist in anyone, just need to be practiced more and more. One last thing that I want to say, we are about to celebrate the Jewish New Year's in, I think, 2 weeks, 3 weeks' time, right? Now, as an entrepreneur myself, as an investor today, innovators, the one thing that we all share is that we're extremely optimistic. We have to be. Because the chances of an entrepreneur to succeed, or of an investor to do really well, or of an innovator to succeed in innovation, in really revolutions of something new, the chances are low, are against them. So by nature, these professions, attract optimistic people. And generally speaking, if I have to generalize, I would say that Israelis are optimistic. Yeh beseder is a term that we tend to answer for almost any question we're asked. And it means, literally, it means everything will be okay. Now, it can be also very annoying. That for every question you're asked, or you ask someone of a problem or a challenge, they tell you, don't worry, everything will be okay. Right? But here's the thing. Beneath that statement of, don't worry, everything will be okay, there is a strong belief and intent, not just belief and intent to make things right, to act, to change. Again, it can be in small baby steps of your own world, and it could be in larger steps of other things that are greater than just yourself. But there is this intent of making the world around you a better world, and taking on accountability and responsibility for that. With that, I want to thank you for this part and wish you Shana Tova, because that's, of course, Shana Tova, Happy New Year, Happy Jewish New Year. May this year be a sweet year to us all. And I'm happy to continue the conversation together.
I think you can hear us well. Maybe we just go without the mic. It might be a bit easier. Right.
The mic for recording.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right.
Thank you very much.
Wow, very powerful. Talking about the slides, I showed her the picture of my grandchildren. I was recently playing with my granddaughter in Melbourne, Victoria. And she climbed up the slides that way. and as a Chinese grandparent, I didn't say no. I said, just be careful. At least I didn't say no, don't do that. And this is what Hong Kong parents would do. So Chutzpah, you mentioned is a unique culture mindset, and for the audience, if you have not read the book, please do. And I got the book, I read it, and I think I'm going to do a lot more reading about it. But so it emphasizes boldness, audacity, questioning authority, embracing failures, independence, and resilience. Something really, as you said, is nature within people, within kids. And that really is a very powerful message, because kids do not conform, and we're forcing people to conform, right? But there are some saying that there's a negative side of it, which is like overconfidence, resistance to authority, recklessness, individualism at the expense of teamwork, and burnout. So we see some downside of it. But you have brought this in the book in such a graceful and elegant manner, bring the subject with that authenticity, easy to follow. I enjoy the part you talk about family, and also about the military. So let's get into it. But before that, I'd just like to bring a subject of Jack Ma that we all aspired about. Jack Ma as being a non-typical conformist, someone from the... So in an interview by the ASHK Society back in 2019, September 4 years ago. He was interviewed by Duncan Clark for Bloomberg, and it was said that Ma's chutzpah, greed, and especially his determination are what got him to where he is today, well, then, as a very big enterprise, still is. And Alibaba was his third venture. The first two, translation company and the tech company, both failed abysmally. But the persistence of Ma eventually led to the success of that. So it leaves a legacy of first among the equals. Now, the interesting you talk about the, as your childhood in Geneva. So I want to ask a question. Has what happened to the Jews during the atrocity during the World War II, and that led to the establishment of Israel? And does those things like bring everybody equal and make Israel something different? Do you think there's an element of that?
Thank you. I'm sure there's an element to that, right? I think that, again, I'm taking my personal example of my mother coming from Poland and my father coming from Egypt. Honestly, they didn't have much in common. Think of it, right? People from two corners of the world in the 50s. What they did have in common is their desire to build a state. They came to this young state, which was a startup, before the definition of a startup, and the desire to build something together. And two individuals that fell in love. Now, this story is not a special story. It's the story of the state of Israel. And so I definitely believe that the fact that Israel is a nation which is comprised of people from so many different places around the world, with so many different cultures, okay, different cuisines. Can you imagine Polish and from Egypt? Not a lot in common, okay? That fact by itself played an balancing, equalizing, okay, element. In addition to that, of course, the history of or the consequences and the results of World War II and the need at the first years of the State of Israel to create a country while defending it also. So it was not creation in very stable environment where you have the time to think about how you would like the future to look like. Creating a country, building a country while fighting for the country, not just during the War of Independence, but throughout the different wars that Israel had in its first decades. All of these elements, I'm confident that have contributed to the resilience, to the capability of Israelis to adapt to changing circumstances, to the desire to be part of something bigger than themselves? Definitely yes.
And that's what Jack Ma also said in his speech in Israel. He said, he said that he learned two things about Israel during his 2 trips to the country. It has innovation, it has chutzpah, and the courage to change, the third thing. And he reminded us small is beautiful, and one can change the world even if you don't have much. You have brain and a heart, you can make everything possible. I think that really, and I think we talked about this subject before just now. So Israel has lived in a state of tension with its neighbors, and it's always, you don't know when tomorrow will come or not. And in Asia, I guess we see the same, maybe in Japan, when Japan also, after the war, struggled through, and then they grew, and now seems to be subsiding. So how do you see in that context, these are maybe a little bit more political question given the geotension that now China has with US. How do you see, I mean, as a Chinese, we all dread about the history of being, the aid nation in taking advantage of China, and now it's growing in the stage. But do you see the similar focus on success emerging in China, and how do you see in your interaction with obviously entrepreneurs? Do you see that happening in our part of the world?
So I think I'll say that the book was originally published in the US, and as part of my agreement with HarperCollins, so I wrote it in English for the US market, but and I sold them the international rights for the book. But I did add to the agreement a clause that said that if within 2 years from publication they don't sell it into a list of 5 countries that I said, in Asia, by the way, I'm getting back the rights for these 5 countries. Now, why did I choose these Asian countries? Because I do believe, each for a different reason, is at a stage where innovation, technology, at a crossroad between innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, and the thirst to change something. And that's why it was so important for me. And this is, by the way, one of the reasons why the book came out in these countries first, because HarperCollins had the right incentive to do that. So yes, I agree. I think that times of crisis, of different characteristic, can actually result in a better situation. And that may be what we are seeing here.
Yeah. So when your back is pushed against a wall, it can only go forward. That's somebody saying, right?
Yes.
So that
if you want to survive, yes.
That's a good reminder. And for those audience, I mean, we in Hong Kong, I guess we're sandwiched between US and China's struggle right now. We all felt part of it, worry about what's going to happen, etc. But to many people in Hong Kong, I hope the audience also share the view that when there's a danger, there is an opportunity in the Chinese word that says so. So hopefully that's very, very good point there. So let me change the subject, education, that you talk about. Now, one of the things in Hong Kong that many people believe is our education is it the right system? Are we bringing our kids up in the right manner? So the Chinese education system is known for its rigor, discipline, and emphasis on memorization. We're taught to memorize things and mastery of core subjects. But in contrast, I understand that Israeli education encourages creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving. So you're not given a set of solution, go and solve it, as the word. I have to go back to the word later on about things will go right. Actually, you were saying, ihie beseda, right?
Exactly.
That's the Chinese saying, 拳到船到橋頭自然直. When the boat is heading towards the pier, it will be straight. It's a very same philosophical thinking between. There's a lot in common between Chinese and the Jewish system, right? And now, however, our culture emphasizes a high value on academic success while you promote the development of practical skill sets. So how do you see the differences between the two? I mean, on one hand, we see successful landscape in China. We see a lot of entrepreneurs out of the southern Chinese region and out of the northern region too. How do you see the difference? Can you do some comparison in between?
So I'll start by saying that I don't think there is one system which is better than the other. They're just different. And I grew up in Switzerland. I was also, or in Belgium later on, I also had to memorize a lot. And I actually think that there is also some value to memorization. I still remember, things that I learned in second and third grade by memory that I was requested to do. I still remember them today. And there is value to that. Why the Israeli education system is different is a different topic, and which is also interesting. But the fact is that in a classroom of 37 children on average, or 35 kids on average in Israel, and please remember that image of the slide, because that's very important to really understand everything about Israelis. That image tells so much. So these children, when they play like that in the afternoon in the playground, when they're in the classroom, they also have an opinion about everything. And I'll give you a great example that is quoted in the book. I think it's quoted in the book as part of the research I did, comparing 15-year-olds' math results of children in Israel and in Singapore. And they were given the same math equation, which of course has one solution to it, right? One right answer. It's math. Now the kids from Singapore did much better overall. So there was more success, okay, more kids from Singapore that solved the problem with the result at the end, the right result, the right answer. But here's an interesting thing. Most of the kids, or almost all of the kids, I don't want to say 100%, but let's say 95% of the kids from Singapore solved it in one way, the way they were taught, okay, and the similar way. And from the Israelis, where there were less children that were capable of solving that math equation, there were 14 different, those who solved it demonstrated 14 different ways of solution, reaching eventually the right answer. Now, which result is better? I think for different goals, for different purposes, different results of these experiments are right. But they demonstrate a different way of achieving things. In our current world, in the era where we live today, I think that memorization, except for the intellectual or the practice for the brain that it does, okay, just like writing, handwriting, memorization for the sake of having knowledge is less relevant because we have easier access to knowledge, right? Yes. Whereas the soft skills that we talked about, creativity and complex problem solving and social influence and emotional intelligence, these are things that artificial intelligence or softwares cannot yet replace us human beings with. And hence, in the era that we are living in today, if I have to choose where to put more weight, as a parent, okay, I think I would put it more on the soft skills.
That is exactly the point I'm trying to bring out too, because when we see the number, you mentioned Singapore, so happens in Hong Kong. Our kids achieve international claim, and even Asian students in the US also say top in math. Mm-hmm. But when we see the interesting statistic, when we see the number of Nobel laureate from Israel, 25% of Nobel laureate in the world are from Israel. In different, I was reading here, Jewish, and 30%, 40% economics prizes are Jewish, and 30% medicine, 25% physics, and Jewish is only about 0.2% of the world population. So really, it gives us a thought, really challenge us. The way we teach our children, as you said, you must follow the formula. Or why don't let them have some creativity? This is what entrepreneur is about, isn't it? So that's a very interesting question. Now, let me go back a little bit on Chutzpah versus Chinese culture. Maybe so risk-taking, Chinese culture tend to emphasize stability, harmony, avoidance of conflict. We like to give people face. We do not like to have open conflicts. But the difference can be seen in the entrepreneurial spirit. So in the Jewish culture, this is very different. You do encourage risk-taking, audacity. Now, how do you advise our entrepreneurs or people here that may fund the entrepreneurs? How do you advise us to think in that way? Do we trust somebody that has nearly gone bankrupt twice, like Jack Ma, and then hope that he'll come up, but it's no guarantee success? So how do we treat that? This is, I think, what a lot of people in this room in Hong Kong would face.
So I will, with your permission, I will start with a real story that happened to me with my actually American business partners. Okay, my former company was actually a company which was formed between myself and another Israeli colleague and two American partners. So we were four on the founding team, and these two Americans had nothing to do with Israel, so not related to Israel in any way, not Jewish. I think we were probably the first Israelis they ever met. It was really a business collaboration of partners, regardless of, you know, other connections. And when we started the company, we had, you know, this offsite of strategy. Of thinking together about the strategy of our product, the go-to-market. And they came to Israel for the first visit ever. And we had a few days of brainstorm meetings together, the four of us. So 4 people in a room, thinking strategy, brainstorming about different aspects, like many entrepreneurs do, of the business at an early stage. After the true story, okay? After the second day, Joe, one of them, takes me to the side and tells me, Inbal, listen, we were only starting the company. We're really at our first stages. And you and Shirley, that was the name of the other Israeli, you keep arguing about everything. You're not agreeing about anything. I mean, it's just the first weeks. How will we, you know, what's going to happen to the company if we're starting this way? Now, I listened to him, I heard him, and I said, Joe, honestly, I don't know what you're talking about. Now, we were in the same room, we were in the same meeting, okay? We saw completely different things. Shirley and I, we were arguing, but we were not arguing, we were not disagreeing, actually. Although it seemed in his eyes that we were disagreeing about everything. We were just... So first, what I told him was, because that's important, I said, but wait, what we're doing here is an offsite, and it's a brainstorm conversation. It's a brainstorm setting, okay? We even titled it in the schedule, in our calendars, brainstorm strategy, brainstorm financials, brainstorm product. Have you ever seen a pleasant storm? That's the idea of a brainstorm. It's a storm. And then I really realized that the title brainstorm for him meant something completely different than what it meant for us. And at the basic of that behavior, that dynamics between Shirley and myself was trust. So we were disagreeing, not because we were not agreeing with each other, but because for us, it's a great way of thinking. When I say, this is a bottle of water that has these and these characteristics, and she says something else, we don't have to decide between one or the other. Why are you saying that? Let's understand, oh, you may be right and I didn't think about it. And this is this dynamic when conflicts are happening, if at the basics of it, at the foundation, you have trust, and you use the word trust, and I think this is a critical foundation to have in these dynamics. So based on trust and believing that the intent is really an intent for the company. It's not ego. It's not trying to show off who's better. It's just a matter of thinking, which, by the way, goes back a lot also to Jewish way of studying, right? By asking questions, by arguing, by not agreeing. When there's trust there, it's easier then to disagree. And once Joe actually understood that this is the reason, this is why we're acting this way, then the next conversation was already much easier. It was not that frightening, and it did not seem aggressive to him anymore.
So really that building of trust also ended up in not disagreeing, but opening the mindset to different way of doing things. And in a way it can bring out more innovative, different concept. This is what maybe is different in a lot of the maybe Chinese culture tend to say, okay, we agree, and then, okay, I better shut up and not say much. I mean, so I also teach in universities, and I teach in sometimes do workshops for entrepreneurship. And this is one thing I found from, typically, I have very little question from Hong Kong students. Typically. The students who ask questions are from mainland. So I think there's also cultural difference between Hong Kong and the mainland student. I think that spells a lot of difference. Now, another dimension of this is hierarchical. So in the Chinese culture, we were taught to conform. He's more senior. I'm not, I should not say so. He's an engineer, I should not challenge. But how do you see that in the right context to create more dynamics between that?
So I'll connect that actually to your comment about the students and asking questions. Why do I not confront someone more senior? Because I have the bias that he or she knows better. They're more experienced. There's a reason why they're more senior, so they know better. So whatever they say is right. An engineer has learned a lot, he's probably, I'm assuming, a super smart person. He knows better, right? In the Israeli mindset, asking questions, again, is a way of thinking. And going back, for example, to the military, or even to a classroom in Israel, and with your permission, while we're speaking, I'll put a slide here that I think is exactly relevant to this that I have. It's here. Just a second. In the Israeli, just a second, I'm trying to find the right quote. Oh, where did I'll show you my family later. I'm showing all my secrets here. Okay, this is what I was looking for. Oh, but it's hidden, so just a second. As you can, here. Now you can see it. So the former president of the Weizmann Institute, which, some of the Nobel laureates that you've mentioned came out of this very prestigious science institute, okay? And a few years ago, there was a change in positions there. The former president was asked about the education system in Israel. For those who don't know, Israel does very poorly on PISA ratings, for example, and on other rankings of education. I mean, to be honest, really poorly, similar to the US already, okay? So it is a relatively poor rating. And he was asked about that, and now he's the president of the Weizmann Institute, where Nobel laureates are coming from, where people from all over the world are dying to be part of, right? Top science. And he said, the children here in Israel, before even starting, the children he speaks, they already ask. They know better than you being the teacher, okay? Vis-a-vis acquiring knowledge, that's a problem. They don't have patience, they don't have the silence to sit for a second and digest. However, he says, I would not change it. One must give people the feeling they are capable, that it is okay to ask questions, that they can think for themselves. Now, this is coming from the president of the Weizmann Institute for Science, no doubt a super smart person. When asked about the current state of education in Israel, the current children in Israel, because we have a lot of criticism as Israelis to the education system in Israel. We're never happy, with anything, which is also part of the secret, probably, dissatisfaction, right? We talked about that never being satisfied and always criticizing everything in your life, even personally, drives you to change things. So that idea of creating the right dynamic to asking questions, it's a huge challenge. It's a challenge for entrepreneurs. It's a challenge for professors at university. It's a challenge for executives. It's a challenge for parents, right? Because we are used to thinking of ourselves as, part of our confidence or our credential versus younger generations is the fact that we know better. When I'm asked by parents what is the one tip I can give them, and although I really not sure you should follow my tips as a mom, okay? I did my own share of mistakes with our grade 3 boys, like every parent does. But I say and it took me time to be humble enough as a parent to tell to my children when I'm asked something, I don't know. I don't have the answers for that. I don't know. Because it teaches them two things. It teaches them, A, that I really don't have the answers for everything, because I don't, nobody has. But it also teaches them, by role modeling, that it's impossible to think of yourself as someone that has all the answers. And by opening yourself to asking yourself questions throughout life, that's the key for development.
Right. I still got tons of questions, but I think in the interest of time, I might just ask one more, and then I'd like to open the floor. I'm sure people dying to. One question, you talk about the recent hype in, the recent hype in AI and ChatGPT, robotics. So how do you see this technology affecting people? I mean, you mentioned that, you mentioned that you give people creativity, they find different way of doing the same thing. But in the future, there's some saying, especially university level, we're saying, if we give kids, the students, those two, they don't learn to think, and they rely on that. So how do you see that affecting the way we're going forward?
Truth is, I don't really know. I don't have the answers. I don't think anyone knows exactly, what would be the consequences of the adoption of ChatGPT or other Gen AI tools. I do have a very strong belief in humankind, and I think that our brain is actually an extremely sophisticated machine, in the sense that we will learn. I don't think we can avoid these tools anymore. They're here to stay. They're here. It's a fact. Okay. Now the question is either how we adopt them. So ignoring them or not exposing our children to them, in my view, is a mistake. I think that we should actually let them use them and guide them, show them or direct them in how to use them, but we should definitely let them use them. It's a great resource that is out there.
Right. Oh, actually, I do have to ask this particular question about the role of government, and maybe in the context of Israel for our local audience. So we see the roles of many government that wants to enable innovation, but often that falls into the path of the government bureaucrat trying to steer and manage and control the direction by the bureaucrats, which, I guess. So do you see from the Israelis context that would this be something that we should pursue, or what should the government do in terms of how do they steer and guide innovation direction?
So in my experience as an entrepreneur or as an investor, as an executive in the tech ecosystem in Israel for the past 30 years already, not as a governmental official, I think that miraculously, and maybe because of lack of, excuse me, yes, for saying this here in front of governmental officials. Yeah, I see that. Maybe because of actually lack of strategy, which sometimes is actually good, okay? Throughout the past decades, the government of Israel actually, the different governments of Israel, actually did some very, very bold moves, initiatives that resulted in very positive outcomes, okay? One of them, or part of them, were catalyzing and incentivizing foreign funding into the country. So we said Israel has the highest, is attracting more venture capital per any other country in the world. This is definitely as a result of some steps that the government of Israel did in the early 90s to incentivize foreign investors to invest in Israeli technology. But at the same time, what they did, which was very smart, they said, we want to incentivize them to come, but we are a government. We're not a VC. We don't know how to manage. We don't want to hold equity in companies. So we're incentivizing them. We're giving grants of different types, the famous Yozma project. But the government is not partner to startups, because that's not our role. So this is one example of a very, very creative back then move that the government did. To quote the former chief scientist of Israel, a friend of mine that I had a pleasure to speak a lot about policies, a quote which is out there, he said, my main role as the chief scientist of Israel is not to interfere with what's happening in the tech ecosystem in Israel, to only help where I can. An example where the government today is very active in a good way in helping is in boosting the representation of underrepresented groups into the Israeli tech ecosystem. Again, incentivizing and creating the frameworks and the organizations that can help bring the non-typical standard profile of the Israeli entrepreneur from other groups in our society and bringing them in. This is where, for example, the government today is actually extremely active and contributing a lot.
Good. Okay, so we only have time for maybe 2 quick questions. So I don't know. So one. Oh, maybe. Okay, lady in red.
Thanks so much for both of your talks. For entrepreneurs who don't have a formal legal background, which would be 2 to 3 complex David and Goliath type of cases that you would share with them that would be valuable?
So maybe the most critical element that I see where most of the mistakes are done with people, not necessarily with not legal background, but not enough business entrepreneurial background, is actually the founding stages. The cap table at the first, or how the venture, okay, is originally structured between the partners, assuming it's not a solo entrepreneur, where most of the cases in tech, it's not a solo entrepreneur, it's a group of people. So how they think about dividing that cake at the beginning, and what are the dynamics, the legal dynamics that they create between them, okay? That can really define later on success or failure, which is not related to the business accomplishment sometimes or to the solution, the technology that they're bringing, but actually to structure. It's like building a table on unstable legs. So this is one thing that I see a lot with early stage startups, where a lot of mistakes can be just avoided. I mean, most of the, because you've defined it, your question through the legal perspective, and I actually think that as long as they take a tier 1 legal firm that advises them, that have seen, for most entrepreneurs, it's either the first entrepreneurial initiative they're taking or the second or third, like in Mr. Ma's case, right? For their legal advisors that they can take, for the financial advisors, the CPAs that they can hire, they've seen it all. They have a lot of experience. So I would say, why worry with the legal questions? Just bring in the right legal help and let them teach you what are the right mechanisms, what are the right solutions, to act upon. You don't need to become a legal expert. You should focus on what you know how to do.
So again, the same quote. Ihie Beseda. I'm getting that. Oh, one last question. He was
wonderful presentation. Just want to as entrepreneur or VCs, when you have to make a decision, I'm starting the business or I'm investing. So sometimes it involves like spending your personal savings or half of it, or even get into debt or liability. So I mean of course we can keep telling ourselves somehow okay, everything will be fine. But when you have to make the final decisions, to face the deepest fear that keep people, I guess, entrepreneurs awake at night. So what will you tell yourself when you're, okay, I'm doing this, I'm stepping in, or I'm investing in this firm that used a lot of money or capital. So what will be the core inner fear that you have to tell yourself to face that?
So usually as an investor, but I want to also answer that from the side of an entrepreneur. as an investor in early stages, there's more uncertainty than certainty, okay? Because the numbers are not necessarily already based on reality. It's predictions of something which is unknown. And even the acceptance of the solution in the market, the validation is not clear because it's not, okay? So there's a lot of uncertainty. The one thing you can see already is actually the team, the founding team. So as an investor, for me, the most important thing at these stages is to try and assess the team, but not on what they know. Because like I said before, we live in uncertain, rapid changing times. What they think they know or what they know for now will 100% be different in 6 months, in 12 months, in 24 months. It's their ability to evolve, to grow, to listen to feedbacks. Okay, that is for me the most important thing. Now, for an entrepreneur, the question I think they should ask themselves, and I ask them to ask themselves that question. The most critical resource that an entrepreneur has is not money, is actually time. Okay, because when you spend a month, a year, 5 years, 10 years on something, you don't spend it on something else. Right? So, and time we cannot buy back. None of us, right? So one of the questions I ask them is, are you sure that if things go right, if you succeed, this is a journey of on average 7 to 10 years. That's the typical life cycle of a successful, okay, initiative. Are you confident that you are willing to spend the next 7, 10 years of your life going to bed every night thinking about this and waking up every day worrying about this business? That's a question you need to ask yourself as an entrepreneur. And that's not an easy question to answer. And you'd be surprised how many entrepreneurs, when asked that, will say, you know what, no, it's not enough interesting.
Okay, so we have to, we can be here for hours.
I can be here forever if you want. I can stay here, that's fine.
But can we all give a clap of hand for such a wonderful sharing?
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for coming. We hope you had a good night. And thank you especially to Inbal and Andrew for such a fascinating discussion, and to the Consulate General of Israel for bringing Inbal to us. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.